Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us, everyone. My name is Shahela Begum. I'm the program director of the Long Island Sound Community Impact Fund. As you may have noticed, we have an RFA that's open right now, and letters of interest are due on November 21st by 4 p.m. And so part of the series of LISCIF trainings, we help applicants try to make the process a bit easier for them to apply for a federal grant, build a federal budget. And so I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Andrea Polly and Kelly Marty, to introduce themselves, and then we can get started. So maybe I'll turn
Kelly
it over
can.
to Kelly
Sure.
and then.
Um, I can start. My name is Kelly Marty. I'm a program associate for the LISCIF program. And I'm here, yeah, I'm just here for this, just to facilitate this meeting as well, or this training. Thank you.
And hi, everyone. As Shahela mentioned, I'm Andrea Polly. I am the grant administrator for the LISCIF program. And when we say LISCIF, we mean Long Island Community Sound Impact Program. So we use our acronyms interchangeably. So just so you guys know. And so today we will break down the components and some of the principles and guidelines of creating your federal budget for your LISCIF application. So we'll start out. Our modules that we're going to cover are the general principles and considerations, direct costs, other direct costs, and indirect costs, which are all the components of your federal budget. If at any time you have questions, you can put them in the chat, or if you'd like to save them to the end, we can discuss as well. So starting with our budget principles and standards. And so we know that we often hear cost allowability when dealing with grant funds. So in this section, we'll talk about allowability, the principles for cost allowability, and pre-award costs. So for federal funding, costs must be necessary, reasonable, allocable, and allowable under 2 CFR 200, which again, dealing with federal funding, you will hear a lot of. Allowable costs include salaries, fringe benefits, supplies, travel, contractual services directly tied to your project goals. Unallowable costs include alcoholic beverages, interest on borrowed funds, lobbying, and entertainment. And that goes across all federal funding. So again, allowable costs are those that are necessary, reasonable, allocable, and permit under the terms of your LISCIF award. So those costs that you need to support your project and your work plan are the costs that we should see in your budget. So necessary, this means that these costs are essential to achieving your objectives of your program. Reasonable, this means that the cost should reflect what a prudent person would pay under similar circumstances. So if we're doing travel, we want to make sure that we're not traveling first class, although I know we would love to, but we think about what a prudent person would pay, it would not be first class. Allocable, this means that the costs directly benefit the project and is charged in proportion to the benefit received. Consistently treated, this means that at times we're dealing with several different funding streams. It could be all federal, it could be foundation, donations. You have to make sure that your costs are being treated the same across all of your federal and non-federal activities. And allowable versus unallowable. Again, we mentioned allowable earlier, salaries, travel, supplies, to name a few. And unallowable costs are alcohol, lobbying, fines, or entertainment expenses. So some grant awards allow you to charge pre-award costs, and LISCIF is one of those. But there are some things to keep in mind when you're charging pre-award costs. Pre-award costs are expenses incurred in anticipation of an award before the official start date. This means that if you receive your grant, you are awarded a grant, let's say October 1st, you're awarded a grant. The time that you spent, I'm sorry, if you hear my dog, please excuse me. He loves for me to get on meetings and start barking, so I apologize. So if you can, the time that you spent, as long as it is a cost that is already outlined in your budget, you can charge that to your grant prior to 90 days of the actual grant period start date. And we can go more into that if you guys want to later. And you'll see the allowability and all of that repeated because that's really important when building your budget. So again, must be necessary for timely project startup, allocable to the approved work plan, which means it needs to be included in that work plan. And always keep in mind that these charges are incurred at your own risk. Once we receive them, if they are costs that were not included on your approved budget, say for example, there are salaries that you are trying to charge that weren't approved on there, or there's work. Some items are not allowed to be paid with grant funds. So if you're trying to charge certain things, we will review that to make sure it is allowed. So keep in mind that pre-award costs are still charged at your own risk. Allocable, they must directly benefit the LISCIF funded project. Again, the timing is allowable if incurred within 90 days prior to the award start date. The requirements must be included in the grant application and budget narrative, and it cannot be charged if the award is not made or the costs are disallowed. And again, incurred at the applicant's own risk. And there are some key references there. And I'm sorry, I should have stated, you guys will receive the slides after this if you want to spend more time. And if you have questions, please feel free. If you don't want to ask them on the webinar, please feel free to send us an email. And if we need further clarification on anything. But if you have any questions about your award costs, please contact your project director, Shahela, or myself for guidance. So going into building your budget, so we always start with our direct costs. So our direct costs are costs that can be directly assigned to a specific project or program. So the examples of this are personnel, your people that will actually be carrying out the grant program, fringe benefits, which include your taxes associated with the personnel salaries, any health insurance that you may include, or other benefits that are included in your organization's internal policies. Travel, equipment if necessary, supplies, contractual, and other direct costs. So we will go into each of those line items. So personnel costs include salaries and wages of employees performing the project work. This does exclude contractors, consultants, and subrecipients. So anyone that so full-time and part-time associates that are directly working on the project are included in personnel. Any people that you have contracted, whether it just be an actual contractor or interns, things such as that, they will be considered a consultant or a contractor, so they will not be included in the personnel line item. Make sure that you are breaking down the costs and the time for each person that is listed in the personnel category. And this is, and I'll show you a bit later in the narrative exactly what that means. And also make sure that you have a narrative for all of your staff that's describing the project activities that they will complete while working on your LISCIF project. And so the example here is we have a project coordinator that their annual salary is $75,000. However, they are only spending 25% of their time on the actual LISCIF grant. And so you have to take into consideration the time that is going to be spent. And so this will vary. A lot of times, our executive level or managers are, spending a percentage of their time on one grant, as their time probably has to flow across all funding streams. But your main staff will more than likely be 100%, depending on how your organization sets it up. But however, you guys are handling that internally, just make sure that when you are submitting your budget, you are including that breakout in your narrative. So 75,000 at 25% at 12 months, because this is based on a 1-year proposal. And so that gives us the actual breakdown of what we will be paying the project coordinator for this year. And as you can see, the narrative below explains exactly what they will be working on. So the project coordinator, Taylor Smith, will dedicate 25% of their time to the project by coordinating and organizing regular council meetings between all partner organizations, ensuring compliance with program requirements, and serving as the central point of contact. And so that's just a sample narrative that you can use. Moving on to fringe benefits, and fringe benefits are associated with your staff and personnel. Again, remember, we are only including our direct staff, no consultants or contractors in the personnel category. And so with fringe benefits, you would follow your organizational policy. And the reason we state that is because one, we're in different states, so the taxes are going to be different, whether it be state taxes or not state taxes, things like that. Some organizations pay benefits on behalf of the employees, so it will differ per organization. So you'll need to follow your organization policy regarding what is charged to the fringe benefits category. But you need to make sure that it's consistent for federal and non-federal funded positions. And COLA, or cost of living, adjustments and merit increases need to also be included, and make sure that it's consistent with all staff. So you want to make sure that people that are working on the LISCIF project aren't getting a 50% cost of living increase, and someone maybe working on a non-restricted funds are only getting a 20%, just an example. You just want to make sure that it's reasonable across all your positions. And so the example here is just breaking out each of the fringe categories, each item that's included in your fringe category. And here we have our FICA, our health insurance, workers' comp, unemployment compensation, and this company also pays retirement. And so it has the breakdown. And again, it varies per organization. So you want to make sure you're including each item that is paid, the computation, and the total cost that will be paid on behalf of each employee. And so you will have a sample like this for each personnel staff that's listed in your budget. Moving on to our travel costs. So our travel costs include airfare, lodging, per diem, rental vehicles, and taxes. And please note that your travel costs must be associated with the project, must be necessary and an integral part of the project. And your partner or consultant travel is not going to be listed here. It's going to be listed in the other category. And what I mean by this is some organizations, if they have a contractor, a consultant, or a subrecipient, they do pay for the travel that's done on behalf of this grant, but it will not be in the travel category because they are not considered staff. They are considered consultant. So that travel will go into the other category. And so the sample here is just kind of repeating, make sure that we are listing out the computation on how we came up with our calculation. Make sure we're listing out here, we have in-state and local travel, and we also have out-of-state travel for site visits. If the location is known, list the location, the number of trips, the number of people, and the computation based on the number of miles times the mileage rate, which now is 70 cents per mile. And we know this is normally when you're doing your budget, this is normally an estimate because we don't know exactly how many miles we'll travel. We don't know exactly, where what sites we may have to travel to. So this is based on just prior knowledge of your program and your best estimate. And keep in mind, the entire budget is really your best estimate because by the time you're in implementation, things may change, which are allowed. But a lot of these are your best estimate at the time based on your scope that you're creating and your activities. Our equipment category. And so equipment are items that are not consumed during use and retain their original identity during the period of use. Sorry, that's a little confusing. So they have a useful life of more than 1 year, fair market value of 5,000. And that actually changed. This application that we're applying for is based on after the 2 CFR was updated October 2024. So the new equipment value is 10,000, which I will update that before I send it out to you guys. So just for further explanation, there are some grant awards that were awarded prior to October 2024. So they're based on one threshold, but the 2 CFR 200 was updated October 1, 2024, and a lot of those thresholds increased. So we will notate that. And make sure that if it's for equipment, sometimes it's best for organizations to purchase, say, a vehicle right out, or sometimes it's best to just rent or lease it. And so if you are renting or leasing any equipment, it's going to be included with your contracts and not with your equipment because you're not purchasing it directly. And again, make sure that you break down all costs and you provide a narrative. So here we have listed video cameras. They have a useful life of more than 1 year. And so we have the cost broken out, $1,500 per camera at $3,000. So the example here, if you look at the value is not over the amount, but the useful life is. And so another thing that we have to make sure that we're doing with equipment is we have to make sure that we are keeping the inventory, which is something that I'll mention at the end. So anytime we're purchasing equipment, we have to keep the inventory, which includes the serial numbers, the description, what funding was used to purchase it, and the useful life at the time of purchase. And our narrative is included below. Supplies. So supplies are items that are expendable or consumable materials, which are office supplies, copy paper, training materials, and postage. And make sure again that you're breaking this down. And this is one of those that is it's really an estimate. One, because we're in a time where the cost is one thing today and who knows what it is the next day. And so it is a lot of assumptions as you're dealing with office supplies. And you also may not know everything that you need at the time that you're creating your budget. And so again, this is one of those that is your best guess at the time, but you'll probably need the normal items. You'll need paper, toner, pens, so you can start there and add on as needed. So make sure again that you have your narrative that explains how the items will be used for your project. Moving on to our consultant and contractual category. So for this category, the characteristics of a consultant or contractual relationship is they normally operate in a competitive environment. The consultant or contractor provides goods and services within the normal business operations, and they're ancillary to the operation of the federal program. Their purpose is to obtain goods and services, so they're not subject to federal compliance as we are or as subrecipients are. They have to follow the procurement which shows the micro purchase threshold is 10,000. So any contract or consultant that is above that $10,000 threshold, where we have to get bids on that or quotes on that. And going into that, you have to make sure that the competition is done. So you want to get the best price for your consultant or contractor unless the sole source is justified. And so sole source, we normally sole source is one of those that's really tricky. We normally don't deal with sole sourcing on this level. However, if that's something that you have questions on, if you feel like there's only one vendor that provides a certain service, that is something that we can discuss later. And this is just your example broken out again, showing we have a translator here that's considered a consultant, and then we have a contracted therapist. We have a lease for our copier and printer, and our cell phone services that have contracts. Our other direct costs, examples of this are our rent, registration fees, subawards, participant support costs are some of the few. Again, make sure that we are breaking those down and providing the narrative on each of those. Make sure that for items such as rent, or you may even have utilities, shared costs, just as we had to make sure that we had the percentage broken out in the personnel category, make sure that the costs are properly allocated to show what this specific project is paying for shared cost. A lot of your shared costs will be in the other category. So you definitely want to make sure that you have that broken out. And also making sure, again, that you have your narrative that explains how that cost will benefit the program. If you have something such as rent, then you may want to notate that your key staff are located in that facility, which is why you need to cover rent. And this is also an example of your subaward broken down. And this is also showing the annual salary and the amount, the percentage that they will work on this project for that 1 year. So this is in the subrecipient category. You can see they have the salary and the fringe benefits all broken out. So please make sure, and the training that they will travel to, all of that's broken out for that one organization. So please make sure, as you can tell, the consistency is break out all the costs and make sure they're directly associated with your scope in your work plan. And lastly, we will talk about indirect costs. So you can only charge indirect costs if you have a federal negotiated indirect cost rate, or a NICRA, or you can do the 10% modified total direct costs. You have to make sure that on your indirect costs, they are expenses that are incurred for a common or joint purpose benefiting more than one cost objective. So again, costs that are shared. And so some of those examples are space and utilities, and I mentioned those before in the other category. And so those can be used interchangeably. If you want to charge your rent and utilities to indirect, you have that option as well. A lot of times, some of our smaller organizations may not have an internal HR or accounting firm, so that's an item that needs to be outsourced. And so that is indirect costs, and any general administrative support is an indirect cost too. So if you have a federal negotiated indirect cost rate, that is something that we will request. And anytime that is updated, we will need that as well. Or you could just choose to use the 10% de minimis rate. And this is an example of both. So the top example, this organization has a 32% indirect cost rate, which is fairly high. And we see this a lot with our universities and things, state agencies. So it has the breakout. So you want to make sure that you are the percentage of your indirect costs, you are charging that to your overall modified total direct costs to get the total amount of your indirect costs. So 32%, and they're using their direct salaries. And this is something that varies per organization too. Some people they choose, if they have a NICRA, negotiated indirect cost rate, it is based on either their modified total direct cost or a certain line item as described here. So this organization, their NICRA is only associated with their direct salaries. So their direct salaries are a total of $212,700. And so they are multiplying that by that 32% indirect cost rate to get that total of 6864. For the de minimis rate of 10%, this is solely based on the modified total direct cost. And so once you break out the modified total direct cost, this organization came up with a total of $467,009. So you simply multiply that by that 10% to get that 46,701. So our final reminders, make sure that we break down all of our costs, make sure the computations, the percentage that is worked on the program is shown, or the hours. Some people also choose to use the hours instead of the percentage. Make sure that is broken down. Make sure that shared costs are allocated properly across all programs so that no one program is paying more than its fair share. Make sure that you are providing a detailed narrative for all your costs. Use only the federal cost categories. So when you are in your application and applying, that's all you will see. And so you won't be able to add any new ones anyway, but just want to highlight that. And make sure that your total project time complies with your program solicitation. So make sure you accurately have your budget aligned with your timeline that is highlighted in your scope of work. And triple check your calculations. But the good thing about that is you'll be inputting them on our system, so it will do that for you. So you don't have to worry about that as much. So following our webinar, you will receive the following documents: a subrecipient versus contractor guidelines to further break that out. We also have a checklist that you can use to go through yourselves to determine whether an organization or a vendor is considered a contractor or a subrecipient. You will also get a participant support cost form. Sorry, that's misspelled. And you will get a property management guide that further explains your equipment and what's needed if you are to purchase equipment. And that concludes our breakdown of our budget. I don't know if that was a lot or if you guys are already familiar with this. However, if you have questions, you can feel free to ask them now, or if you want to just kind of get the slides and really take a look at those and send those questions to us, our contact information is here, and you can just send those to all three of us. And so I will stop and let you guys ask any questions that you may have. None?
I will also thank you for that presentation, Andrea. I will also say, in particular to the LISCIF funding, if you carefully read the RFA, it'll give you like a breakdown of what's like ineligible, what's allowed. But as you're kind of working through of possibly putting in an LOI, if you come across any difficulty, whether on the Amplifund platform or just you working through your budget, you can always reach out to us with any questions you may have of allowability, or if think what like how did some certain things work with the federal government, things like that. I also as people are thinking maybe about questions, I also wanted to share that we have another training coming up on October 21st between 3 to 4, and that training focuses on how to write a strong grant for your as you're working towards the LOI. So if you guys would like to attend that, that's on October 21st, and I put in the registration link in the chat as well. Yeah. Does anyone have any questions or concerns or any, whether about the budgeting or just the LOI in general or the grant? And also, we're also here to talk about any questions you might have about like your project design. So feel free to reach out to Kelly, Andrea, and I if you have any questions regarding that too. But thank you so much for your time and thank you for attending this training.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Enjoy the rest of your week.
Yes, you too. Thank